to Season 5 of the Hey Girl podcast with your host and my mom, Bethany Needham. This season, we get to hear from some incredible new guests, and we're bringing back some of our faves. Each guest will share their story of running their race in their place, and we hope they inspire you to do the same. If you want more information or to connect with my mom, go follow our new Instagram at HeyGirlGram, friend us on Facebook at HeyGirlPod, or even better, join our brand new Patreon to get bonus materials, hang with my mom, and you get to help Hey Girl continue to grow and reach more people. That's pretty cool. All right, time to grab that seltzer and maybe a tissue box just in case. Here's my mom.
Hey listeners, and welcome back to another week of the Hey Girl podcast. I am so pumped because this week I get to introduce you to my new friend, Katy. Y'all, Katy is such a sweetheart. I loved sitting down to talk to her, and I can say now it's been a little while since we've done the interview, but I've had a few weeks now to be working through her new Bible study. She smiles without fear. And I'm going to be totally honest with you. This has been one of my favorite new Bible studies that I have done in a long time. I'm really, really enjoying it. So if you're looking for a Bible study, maybe you just want to put one on your list. She Smiles Without Fear. Look it up by Katy McCown. It's so, so good. I love it. And here's what I'm going to say. This episode, at least for me, was something that I just left so encouraged and appreciative of who Katy is, the heart that God's given her, and how she's such a great example of running your race in your place. And so I can't wait for you to meet her. Before we jump into the episode, as always, thank you for taking the time to listen. If you haven't already and you have a few moments to go, leave us a 5-star review. It really does help with other people trying to find us. If you don't want to leave a 5-star, you're like, I'm feeling like Hey Girl's not quite a 5-star. You don't even have to leave a review. That's fine. You can just tell me in private messages. It won't hurt my feelings for that long. Just kidding. But leave a review, share us with your friends, keep listening. We really, really appreciate our listeners, and shout out to our Patreon members. I'm loving getting to know you. If you're still thinking about joining the Patreon, head on over to BethanyNeedham.com. You can find the Patreon link, get all the details there. We would love to have you join our crew over at Patreon. And without further ado, I can't wait for you to get to know and hear from Katy. So here's my new friend, Katy. Well, listeners, I am so excited because I get to sit here with Katy McCown, who is a brand new face to me, but you have come highly recommended. I've actually I went and sort of searched your name, like creepy cyber stalking sort of thing. It's the way that we do it.
It's what we do.
And just loved even the little bit that I read and saw of the things that God is doing in your life. And so first of all, Katy, thank you so much for coming on the Hey Girl podcast.
I am so excited to be here. This is just such a treat today. And I have already just loved the little bit of conversation that we've had. And so this is just fun, a great way to spend an afternoon.
Yes. And you're out there in warm Texas, and I'm all bundled up here in New Hampshire. And I love that just technology allows these kind of conversations to happen is pretty cool. So yeah, Katy, I already gave away that my connection to you is that you came recommended. So once again, these are my favorite guests to have, are people that I don't necessarily know them. So I feel like I get the listener experience to sit and kind of hear for the first time. So why don't you just take some time and share with our listeners, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I just always feel like, I feel like that's the hardest thing to do. That's like one of the hardest questions to answer. Tell us about yourself, and you mentioned it before, there are so many things that are just so normal to you. And then you forget that somebody doesn't know you. So I'm going to try to do this. I will tell you, if I had to sum up like my life story, I would say it's a who would have said story. And I say that, like, if you've read in Genesis, when Sarah is, having a baby, or she's at the point where she has the baby.
Yeah.
And there's this verse, and I wish I could remember what chapter. I should have looked it up before I got on here, but I just thought of it. But she says, who would have said that Sarah would give birth to a child? Because the whole story where it's like it's past childbearing years and all of that. And I feel like that's so much of my story, because God just surprises me with things that I would have told you, one, I was never capable of or cut out for or really had any interest in. But who would have said but God, right? And so I am a twin by birth. I have a twin sister.
What?
And yes, and people say we're identical. We were born before we had all of the 3D, imaging ahead of and all of that. And so it really was one of those things that my grandmother did not even believe my mother was having twins until there were two of us. She didn't believe the doctors. She was like, no, there's not two babies in there. And then there were two babies. And so she believed mom was having twins. And so I grew up a twin sister, which was just like a built-in best friend. And so now I'm raising 6 children, none of which are twins. I had all 6 of them individually.
Wow.
But it's so funny having one at a time, and then like sending them like to school alone. Like, this one child is going to this campus all by himself. And I'm like, he needs a friend because I never went anywhere alone. And so it's funny, the things that you don't even realize become so normal and you're accustomed to that. I mean, I remember sending my oldest son to camp for the first time by himself. And I didn't know what to do with myself because he didn't have a built-in, buddy to go with him. So my sister and I do not live in the same city anymore, but we still talk like we do. And so again, like you said, with technology and all of the things that we get to do with each other, even though we live a couple of hours apart, it's been great. But I grew up, my dad was a sports television broadcaster.
Super cool.
And so I grew up in that world. Like, we would go, Friday night football is a big thing in the high school sports world. And we'd go up to the station on Friday nights and call around to get scores. And I just kind of saw that world and never did expect to do anything with it. I never enjoyed English in school. In fact, I really disliked it very much. It was one of my least favorite subjects. I didn't like to write essays. I didn't like to read long novels. I just didn't want to do it. I don't think I had the attention span for it. So I never expected to do anything like that because I associated journalism with writing, and I didn't like to do that. And then when it came time to go to college, my dad asked my sister and I to take one journalism class, just because he knew all the people in the journalism department. So he said, just take one class. And so I took one class and I never changed my major. I fell in love with it. It was a very different style of writing than English writing. You kind of got straight to the point, short, punchy sentences. I could get on board with that. And so I went to college and graduated with a journalism degree and went straight into television, broadcast journalism, and did that for a couple of years before I married my college sweetheart. And funny thing, growing up in a world where my dad was just immersed in sports, I never really liked athletes. I don't know if it was because my dad tried to steer us away because of all that he had seen.
Yep.
Or if it was just so much a part of what he did that I was just never super interested in athletes. And then I married a professional athlete. And so I obviously love my athlete now, but my husband was the quarterback at the College of Louisiana Tech, where we went to school, and I married him, and he was drafted to play in the NFL. And so the year that he was drafted was the year that we got married. We went to school in Louisiana. That's where I grew up. And he was drafted to the Cleveland Browns. And so we moved from Louisiana to Cleveland. And you're laughing because we were talking about the weather and in the South, if it snows, and it doesn't usually, but if it snows, we don't go anywhere. I'm pretty sure Walmart closes, schools definitely close. You just stay home. You like hunker down. A lot of times the power goes out. I mean, you just stop.
If Walmart shuts down, it's serious.
Where do you even go? If there's no school and no Walmart. And so we moved to Cleveland, and we soon learned. And I want to say, honestly, I think the year that that very first year we were there, his rookie season, I think was their like record snowfall year, and so we never did shovel the driveway. We never did shovel the walk because we didn't know we were supposed to do that. And I know our neighbors laughed at us like, what are these people doing? We were up there as newlyweds with our one dog. We had a Great Dane who also didn't know what to do in the snow. He just kind of stood like a statue. Like, am I supposed to move in this? And so that was our first year of marriage, and quite an adventure. So much fun. We actually just fell in love with the Midwest and all the metro parks. And it was a lot of fun and a lot of learning. We moved up there with me and him. We didn't know a soul. So when it's just the two of you, you have to figure out how to get along. If you, one thing before we ever had our own place, we lived in a 1-bedroom hotel room with one rental car. And I remember one of our first arguments, and I just had to go sit in the bathroom because I didn't have anywhere to go.
Oh no.
There was nowhere to go. It was the hall or it was the bathroom. And so I went and sat in the bathroom. So it was a lot of fun. We look back and we go, wow, it wasn't easy, but it was such a great time for the two of us to really become one. And to figure out all of those first year of marriage things that there were no distractions. It was easy, to know what we needed to figure out.
Yeah.
And then, we go up there and he was drafted as a rookie, and we just kind of had this plan that we would be there for like at least 5 years. And then after that, we would decide if we were going to stay there another 5 years or move somewhere else, maybe join another team. That was just kind of how we thought. And within the first year of him being drafted, that whole team kind of fell apart isn't a great word, but I mean, like the coach retired or resigned in the middle of the season. I mean, they just moved into rebuilding mode.
Yeah.
And a part of that was Luke being traded to another team. And we had no idea. We heard about it first when we read it on the internet the day before, the day of the trade. Ooh. The morning of the trade, he read it on the internet. And we thought, oh, and just a little side note, we were pregnant with our first child at that time. And so we had actually just finished the nursery the night before. And, the first baby, like you do the nursery, like you read all the magazines and like you research the best theme for the nursery and all of that because you have all that time. So we had friends come in town. We painted the walls. We like built this 3D barn coming out of the wall. It was a perfect nursery. And we finished it on Saturday night, and he was traded on Sunday. Oh. And so right then we got our first taste of, this might not go the way we planned. And so that was in March. And so I was about 8 weeks away from delivering our first child. And so we moved overnight just about to Florida. So the weather was way more like what we were used to. It was actually a blizzard in Cleveland the day that we were traded. And then we flew to the palm trees and the sunshine and the beach. So that was not that bad. We were like, hey, we can get used to this. But then all of the things set in about, I mean, wow, we are about to have a baby. We need to find a pediatrician. We need to find a doctor to deliver this baby, in a hospital where we're going to go when we do. And where are we going to live? And we're in a hotel again. And just all of the things that need to get done before you have a baby. So it was just a whirlwind. And then we had our first child. Really, that first year kind of set the stage for his entire career. So Luke played as a quarterback in the NFL for 13 years, which is a really long career, really great. But he was primarily a backup quarterback. And even without the playing time, he had 3 surgeries from kind of fluke injuries, some of them even non-contact. And in that entire 13 years, we had our 6 children. And I went back and did the math. And with every one of those babies, except for one, we moved in the first 3 months of the baby's life or 3 months prior to the birth of the baby. So we had all of the kids in the move, while we were moving, and he was traded again overnight again, right after we had our 3rd child. And we just really, we did not expect all of that. We dubbed it uncertainty, and it was something that we began to expect after feeling like so often it was a surprise. We didn't see the moves coming. We certainly didn't see the injuries coming. And so after several of these things happening over and over again, we just realized that what we were expecting was probably not exactly what was going to happen. And at first it was really defeating or frustrating, or, we kind of thought, what are we doing wrong here? Why is this not working out the way we planned over and over again? And what we realized as we just continued to walk through each one of these things with God, and we just kind of realized, the way I've always said it is that even though God's plan seemed to sideline our plans, it never sidelined our purpose. And so it wasn't the plan that we had arranged, and it wasn't what we had expected, but we began to see the purpose in everything that God brought us through. And if it was a move, we began to see the people that God was putting around us to pour into or to learn from. If it was an injury, so often we would encounter people who needed encouragement, or who needed to know that even when it all wasn't going according to your plan, God still had a plan, and he was still in control, and he was still good and faithful and loving. And we learned to be very flexible as we were having the kids. And oh, by the way, I told you that I feel like it was a who would have said story. I was never the girl that anyone would have called the nurturer in the group. I mean, I didn't even babysit when I was a teenager. After I had my first baby, I remember looking at Luke going, why are you so much better at this than me? This isn't right. Shouldn't I be better at this than you? I'm the mom. Like, I'm supposed to know how to hold the baby or bathe the baby or something. And you're so calm and so natural. And I'm over here freaking out after one. I am not even kidding you. After one, people ask me a lot of times, the question I get is, which was the hardest transition, from what child to what child, what number? And I always say 0 to 1, because I had no clue as to what I was doing. And I even asked Luke, our first child was a boy. And when we got pregnant with our second one, I asked him, if it is a girl, can we please be done? Well, it wasn't a girl. And we always had said we wanted more than 2 kids anyway. And so he kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? And it was just, if there were someone that you would say she's going to have 6 kids, it would not have been me. And I still wouldn't pick me out of a crowd and say, yes, of all the people, she would have 6. But again, it was God doing things that I never could have imagined, blessing me in ways that I never would have expected. And then I mean, honestly, I got to the point where I would have had more. It was crazy that the transition that God did in my own heart and life, because by the time I had my 6th, I would have had 7 or 8 or however many. And so he just taught me, and he put me in places to grow and to learn and to be so blessed in ways that I never would have chosen if it had been my plan. So I'm sure I left some things out, but I guess that's a pretty good start.
No, goodness. I love so much of your story. I appreciated so much when you were just saying about, how God's plans can, how do you say it? Like sideline, like it can sideline our plans, but not our purpose. And I just think that's such a powerful reminder. I was laughing to myself thinking your whole life prepared you for 2020, like for the year of like, what? But, and the other thing is I didn't make the connection that that your husband played in the NFL, because you're our second NFL wife. Well, not current, but had been there. We had Vicky also, that her husband, Vicky Gray, Derwin Gray.
Yes.
It's like, I wonder how small this community is. If you,
I do know them, and they're in Charlotte, and Luke has a brother who played in Charlotte, and so I don't know if the circle. We're kind of old now, and so there's probably plenty in the circle we don't know. But yes, we do know them.
Oh, and so how old are your kids now?
So they range in age from a 1st grader to a 9th grader. Let's see, 7 to 15.
Wow.
So we're in this stage where I feel like we're about to move into the next phase, because this summer we will have our first driver.
Yes.
And then it's like every other year, another one's driving. So, wow. I will say, everybody always says it goes fast. And when you're in the throes, because when our baby girl was born, my oldest was 8. So we had a newborn to an 8-year-old, and we did homeschool. So we were at home together all the time. And yes, those days can seem long and endless. We have moved out of that, and now everybody goes to public school. And then, we're in this place where they're about to start driving, which is just, I still can't wrap my head around it. And we're just a few months from it, but it's a lot of fun. And I just try to sit in the stage that we're in. Right. And just get my feet sunk in really good and soak it up and learn, always learning, and praying for all of the wisdom that I don't have, that I know God does.
Oh, man, I feel you. So my baby, I only have 2, but my youngest is 15, and she'll start driving this summer. And so my oldest is driving now, and it's a major, so I was a youth pastor for a number of years, and I've always been grateful for the wisdom that I gleaned from moms who were walking years ahead of me in this.
Yes.
And some of the things that always stood out that I'm like, oh my goodness, were they right? Is I had one mom tell me to be aware that come middle school, the time it feels like something ticks up, like it just starts going a little bit faster. And she's like, you feel like it takes forever to get there, but then you're there and you're like, oh my goodness. And she's like, in high school, she's like, buckle up. And it's felt like that. Like my son, both my kids teased me when they came up on their birthdays. They were like rubbing it in, like, guess how old I'm turning. So my son's 17 now. Like he's junior year of high school, and I literally feel like we just put him into middle school. So that whole line, the days are long, but the years are short. I was like,
Right.
I've never understood that more.
Yes. And my oldest, this was his first year of high school, and I pulled up to drop that boy off at high school, and he looks at me, he said, "Well, next step is college." And I was like, "Hang on. Not tomorrow. We still have 4 years." But mine seem to be like yours. They're quick to remind me.
Oh, yes. That and reminding me of how old I am. They're like, "Mom,
Yes.
you know what this means?" And I was like, "Settle down, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Settle down." Oh my goodness. That's fantastic. Well, super exciting. So here's the thing. Somewhere in the midst of this, so you've 6 kids, no big deal. What do you do with your time? Raising 6 children. Your husband, so he's not in the NFL anymore. What is he
That's
currently
right.
doing?
That's a great question. And
As in, we don't really know.
That's right. Well, honestly, it's such an interesting thing because it's a lot like retire. I mean, it is. He retired from the NFL, and that was what he did. And to him, I mean, when he was in second grade, the teacher said, "Write down what you want to be when you grow up." He wrote down a professional football player. So this was the plan since he was what, 8?
Wow.
And that was the mission, and that was the focus. And so for 30 years, 20 something years, he had his eyes on the goal.
Yeah.
And he was working at it. And so then, you retire and it's like, well, now what? Because there was never a plan B. This was always what we were going to do.
Right.
And so he is in a transition phase, and there were kind of a lot of directions where he could go. He loves the game. He loves to pour into young men because of the character that can be built through just what's required of you in teamwork, in hard work, in learning to fail and get back up, all of the great things that it taught him. So he's done some volunteer coaching, and he has done some analyst stuff, where he breaks down the game or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he loves the outdoors. So right now he's currently like digging a pond.
Why not?
Yeah. So he's done a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And he's just waiting to see if there's one direction God points him, or if we continue to stay in a little bit of a few things. And then of course, just being available as dad has been such a blessing that really those years in the league didn't quite afford him because it was a schedule that wasn't flexible. And so the flexibility to be dad and to be available has been a blessing that he has really been enjoying.
It's actually kind of crazy to sit here with you tonight having this conversation so last night was the Super Bowl, and I know we release these at all, so that's going to really throw people off. But our boy Tom Brady, who left us, and that's fine, but we cheered him on to his 7th ring, and I was asking my husband, I was like, what is he gonna do? Like after they retire, what do they do? Because it's not like retired like they're old. They're just old for this sport. And I mean, Tom Brady apparently does not age, is what I've come to gain. Him and Gronk will forever just be forces of nature. But I had that thought. And so it's really interesting from your perspective. And again, we're not interviewing your husband, but I think about this for a lot of us who we go after something and you achieve that goal or whatever it is, that there is this kind of interesting transition after that of, okay, God, so what now? And
it's not easy because we, I think, are so quick to identify ourselves by just by what drives us, which isn't a terrible thing. I love to see people who are moved by their passion, and what drives them is such a wonderful thing to see. But when God transitions us in new directions, it can be difficult. And I've experienced it in other ways, not the same as him, but you bring it up. It happens a lot of times in so many of our lives. I told you that we homeschooled, and when God moved us and clearly from homeschooling to public school, I kind of sat there like, well, what am I going to do with myself now? This is what I poured myself into for all of these years. Or even as a mother, when your children grow up and you've poured yourself into being there for them and teaching them and training them and helping them and loving them, and then they move on. What am I going to do with myself now? And so it can be nails on a chalkboard, kind of a transition,
Yeah.
because you, in beautiful ways, you committed to something that God had called you to and equipped you to, and really directed you in. But what we're learning is that just because you are called to something and that changes, it doesn't mean God's finished with you. It doesn't mean that there's not purpose ahead, and it doesn't mean that you cannot fully commit and invest and pursue the next thing that God has for you. Yes, Luke was a quarterback. He was, and he was really good at what he did. But Luke was a quarterback, but he is not only a quarterback, and we always know this. We're a child of God. Our identity is in Christ. We know that. But when we don't have something to kind of pour ourselves into, we start to go, well, then what am I? We could say, well, who am I? And it's natural. There's nothing wrong with it, but it can be one thing for a while, and it can also be something else. There can be something new. There can be something on the other side of the transition.
Yeah. And I love, as it's funny because in your background, which obviously people can hear us, they can't see us. I see your book, and I'm thinking about even you're sharing your story of, first of all, not even liking English, and then ending up in this journalism class. You marry into with your husband, a lot of moves, a lot of transitions, 6 children. And here you are now. And I know we haven't told a lot of this. So I would love to hear, what was that transition like from you, from going to full-time homeschool mama, 6 kids, all the things. And now, as I joked earlier, because you have nothing else to do, like,
right.
Let's write.
Yes.
And for you to start in this, I don't like using the word calling, only because I feel like our calling is always the same. Like to know God and to make him known, like,
yes,
regardless of where we're at, but these assignments that he gives us along the way. Yeah. What was it like? And what did that transition look like for you?
Yeah. And I love that. I love that you said that our calling is always to know God and make him known. And the thing about that I love so much is the way that I was able to know God and make him known as a homeschooling mother of 6 changed my life. I mean, so yes, I have this Bible study that published in January, and I'm going to get to that because, again, total God thing and amazing. But God changed me when he made me a homeschooling mother of 6. The way that he taught me to pursue him and to put him first, and to trust that every single moment is a moment that can and will be used by God, even if you think nobody else sees it or knows about it. The way that every moment is a moment or that God ordained, and that God, gave you, and God can use and will use in your life and in the life of others. And that is something that could have seemed just mundane, and man, I wish there was something bigger to do. Or, sometimes stay-at-home moms have those feelings And I get it. I mean, the number of times I plunged toilets and cleaned up grape juice, it was like, why put on a clean shirt? It's just going to get dirty again. I know those days, but looking back, they were some of the most precious days of my life because of how much I needed God to do things in me that I couldn't do for myself. And I grew so much as a child of God, and I grew so much in my knowledge of him and my love for him during those days. And I just wouldn't trade it for anything. And then, yes. So, I did enjoy writing. For the first few kids, I would write a little column here and there in the hometown paper where Luke grew up. And then I had more than two, and I couldn't do that anymore. And I did early in my young mother days, when we only had one, maybe even just one child, I did sense that God had a writing journey for me at some point in my life, but that's all I really knew. And it did stick around through all of the childbearing years and toddlers and preschoolers. And then as I was moving around with Luke, and we landed on one team that we were there just for one season. And to be totally honest, I was just a little bit done at that point. We had moved so many times. I had another newborn. It was another unexpected move. Luke couldn't help because he was already there. And I was tired. And at that time we had 5 kids. And I just wanted to move to the city, have dinner on the table, survive, and go home. I ended up at each team that we would play for would usually have a women's Bible study with the wives and girlfriends of the players. And the day that I had no intention of attending this time because I was done. I wasn't trying to make friends. I wasn't trying to be all like fellowshippy. And the day that we moved in, we pulled in the driveway with the U-Haul and we were unloading it. The chaplain's wife shows up at the house with the Bible study book that the team is doing. And she says, "Hey, we're so glad you're here. We're meeting next door tomorrow. We want you to come." And I was like, well, great. I mean, I don't have many excuses at this point because it's next door. And now I've met you and it's tomorrow. And I live next door. So if I don't come over, you're going to come to me. Mm-hmm. So I went, and I had no intention of going all season long, but God. And so I kept going, and they were doing a book that Lisa Turkhurst of Proverbs 31 wrote. Mm-hmm. I had no idea about anything Proverbs 31. I had never even heard of it at this point. Now, in my defense, it wasn't like last year. Okay. So it was, but I didn't know anything about it. And in the book that we were going through, it mentioned a conference for writers and speakers that Proverbs 31 Ministries put on. And so the next year I went to the conference, and the year after that, I volunteered to edit the devotions that they published once a day. And a few months after that, I joined the devotions writers team. And then I joined the writers team for the first 5 app. And then I published a Bible study. And I mean, that's the short version. But again, it just kind of goes back to who would have said, because what just happened? I had no idea of any of this. It was not on my radar. And the crazier thing is that the Bible study is on Proverbs 31. And I was just, okay, I'm going to be totally honest. I did not like the Proverbs 31 woman very much when I was in college. She bothered me. I was like, okay, perfect superwoman. Who can be like you? And I honestly dropped out of a Bible study about the Proverbs 31 woman when I was in college because I just couldn't take another week of her perfection, right? That was how I felt about it. And so she felt so unattainable. And she felt a little bit out of date. I mean, it's stuff about spindles and getting your food, bringing it from afar, and all of the things that I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? And so I really did avoid, and just, it was just a part of the Bible that I didn't dive into voluntarily. And yet it was the portion of scripture that, again, God used to minister to me in such huge ways. And he taught me and opened my eyes to so many things. And it's just amazing how God does what he does when he does it. And so then another who would have said was that I wrote the Bible study in 2019. And it's about fear of the future. So if you're not familiar, Proverbs 31:25 says, strength and dignity are her clothing, and she smiles at the future. And a lot of translations will add without fear of the future. And so that is the aim of the Bible study, is how we can smile without fear of the future. And I wrote it in 2019 because of the process that God had brought me through as he revealed to me how fear of the future was impacting my life. And as he walked me through a process to not create a disaster-free life or a future that'll never have anything to fear, but how to live each day confident that he'll take care of tomorrow. And so that's what I wrote about. And God sent me a sweet publisher to partner with. And we wrote it in 2019 and edited it before we ever knew a thing about coronavirus. And it was scheduled to publish on January 1st, 2021. And I just look at that and go, God is so good. Wow. If we ever needed this hope and something to turn to for answers in God's word, now's the time. And he knew it. He knew it all along, and he had just the right time already planned. So yeah, it was definitely, I mean, when I started the blog, I was pregnant with my 6th child, and I was looking for anyone to tell me about how crazy this was. And everybody thought it was a great idea. Luke was like, you should do it. And I'm like, really? You really think so? But it was one of those things where, on a random weeknight when everyone had gone to bed and the baby was fed, I wrote a really fast blog, and I wouldn't recommend going back and reading those, because who knows what, but it was just one step at a time. It wasn't, it was just, well, this is the door God opened right now. So let's do this, so.
Man, Katy, I appreciate so many parts of your story. To me, resonate with even just the heart of why we do Hey Girl in the first place, is this encouragement to do exactly as you say, that we say run your race, but that other in your place being another really, like, it's not there on accident.
Yes.
That when we are present in the place that God has us, and we, like you said, take baby steps or messy steps or whatever they are towards these places that God's opening doors, that you just don't know at that point, that you look back and you're like, oh, like you can start to see what God is doing. And it's hilarious in your story, because I'm like, man, I feel like you should just, moving forward, think about anything you have an aversion to and assume that God's going to do something.
We're going to do it.
Be like, I don't know what, but he's going to do something in that.
That's right.
But,
and one of the things I love about that, I love run your race in your place. That was one of the things as I was learning about your podcast. I absolutely love it. And, one of the steps in the Bible study to smile without fear of the future is I need to live faithful today. And that's what God taught me. Our best plan for the future is to live faithful today, right where he has placed us. And so I just wholeheartedly agree with that. And I love it.
Well, Katy, I, for one, very much appreciate that you have chosen to live your life that way, because it's led you here, just getting to sit and listen, and then now having this opportunity to share your story with our listeners. And I know I know it's going to be such an encouragement. I think like off the top of my head, I could start naming moms who are in the season of homeschooling or transitioning out of that season, or moms who never planned to homeschool and hello remote school, like and just
I
a
know.
lot of things happening that we didn't plan for
That's
that.
right.
And just having that reminder today and that encouragement that like God is at work. And I always loved it. Like God doesn't waste when we put things in his, like he's not going to waste these things. And I think more than anything, I think I wrote about this the other day, but the enemy would love for us to live our lives believing that lie of after, well, after this thing or after I achieve this thing. And if he can just keep us in that place rather than like you living faithfully today, then he knows what all of us should know, which is we're not promised after. Like we don't know the number of our days. And so what does it look like to be faithful today? Whatever that looks like, cleaning off grape juice, sitting in the stands, cheering on your Super Bowl husband, shout out Giselle, whatever that is. And man, what the beauty that we could see around us to just look around and see each other and cheer each other on. That's my other heart in terms of sisterhood. Like we waste a lot of energy, whether it's wishing we were in her shoes or wondering why she's in that place instead of just like cheering each other on in each of our lanes. So well done, Katy, in your lane.
Oh, I love that. I love everything you said. And you're just exactly right. And and I think when we can cheer each other in our own lanes, then I think what we have to start to realize is that when she wins, we all win because we're all on the same team.
Yeah.
We're all a part of the body of Christ. And so when one part of the body gets stronger, we all get stronger. And when one part of the body is victorious, we're all victorious. And so it's a we thing, not a she thing.
Amen. I like that. A we thing, not a she thing.
And I need to write that down. I've never said that before, but I'm like, that works.
Seriously. You should put that in like your next book or something.
I should just write it down for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Katy, for giving us your time, for taking time to share your story. I really, really appreciate it.
I am so thankful to have done this conversation. I've been smiling the whole time and I'll be smiling the rest of the night.